Welcome to Spinning Back Clique, where each week here at MMA Junkie, we take a spin through the biggest stories in MMA. On this week's docket, we have a new BMF, courtesy of the Austins. The vacant light heavyweight title fight is becoming more and more clear, and we have a free agent in the heavyweight division. I know one fight that'll pay him $2 million. We'll discuss it, all that, and much, much more. Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Gorgeous George, and with me, as always, some of the sharpest MMA minds in the biz. Joining me this week, SBC creator Goes from MMA Junkie Radio. He's here in Sin City. Danny Segura is back, the host of Hablemos MMA. For all you Spanish speakers, check out his YouTube show. It's outstanding. And of course, our international superstar reporter, Farah Hanoun, links up with us from Morocco. Cold coffee on the ones and twos. Let's get to it. All right, guys, main event at UFC 291 this past Saturday. That's what produced our new BMF. Justin Gaethje defeated Dustin Poirier via head kick and a couple of follow-up strikes. It was 1 minute into round two. When the fight came to a halt, Gaethje's the new BMF and the OG himself, Jorge Masvidal, the original BMF, was there in person to hand the belt to Gaethje. Panel, I need you to react to this. What were your thoughts on the fight? What did this result do for the highlights career? We turn to the Fada for the first take of the week.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I picked Dustin Poirier to win, but when I was doing the preview show with Danny, like literally hours before, I just had this gut instinct where I said, maybe I can see Gaethje getting this done early. I said, I can't envision a late Gaethje finish, but for some reason I can envision a early Gaethje finish, and that's what we got. And hey, it looked like Gaethje was surprised that he was able to land and finish Poirier like that, but an amazing finish nonetheless. It was a beautiful head kick. Poirier partially blocked it, but it, wrapped around the back of his head, as you can see in the video here. Just a beautiful shot, a beautiful finish. It was not the war that everybody expected. It was funny because Gaethje, when I think it was Shaquille Majhouri that he did the interview with, when he asked him, would you turn around, and that was, I guess, before they announced Oliveira and Islam rematch, would you turn around and fight in Abu Dhabi for the title? He said 0% chance. When you look at that performance and the way he came out of it, I don't think it would have been a 0% chance, but ultimately the UFC went with Oliveira and Makhachev, which I don't hate. I think Oliveira deserves it, but it's funny that this fight really did not pan out the way anybody expected it to, but spectacular finish nonetheless from Justin.
Yeah. We never reached deep waters, but we got our resolution, that's for sure. All right, Goes, I want you to react to this main event. And did they pull it off? I mean, is this BMF thing, again, something that, you want to see a little bit more of? Oh, one last thing, Goes. Was Herb Dean safe or out at the very end then? I wasn't sure.
Yeah, that was a pretty good Herb Dean moment there. It was a nice slide. Look, I think we all kind of saw what happens when Justin Gaethje actually sticks to a game plan, right? We saw in the last fight, he actually decided to go for a takedown. I think we all pretty much knew that was just a one-time thing. But here in particular, if you look at that first fight, I felt like there were more methods for Justin Gaethje to improve on a second fight than there were for Dustin Poirier. And I think what he did was he wasn't as wild, right? He was more dialed in. He didn't throw wild strikes. He took his time, and granted, I think some of that had to do with maybe the elevation in a 5-round fight. But he was a smart fighter here, and it was just a matter of time. You could kind of tell he was gauging his distance. I didn't think he was going to finish with a head kick the way he did, and I'm surprised the UFC didn't show that more. Man, poor Dustin Poirier had to watch that like 15 times before they even got to the interviews. But a great performance for Justin Gaethje, and that performance for me, like I know a lot of people are going to say, all right, well they're 1-1. What do we do now? That performance for me kind of screams more like Justin Gaethje should be looking up. Like if you look at that fight, Yes, he's the BMF now, and I do like the fact that Justin kind of held on to the belt and held it over his shoulder. If you remember the interim title, he kind of wanted nothing to do with it. So I thought in the end the BMF did kind of work, but I think Justin Gaethje's sights are kind of focused on something bigger now.
Heavy belt too, man. He's been struggling to hold that thing up, whether it was in
Yeah.
the octagon or here. All right, and how about Danny Segura down in South Florida? Danny, what did this do for you, man? Did it, did it hit a home run like the UFC wanted it to? Did you change your mind? I think you were a little against this going in, but your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm still not for the BMF title. It just seems a little bit silly. I thought it seemed fine for the situation between Jorge Masvidal and Nate Diaz, but beyond that, I don't want to see it personally. I was excited for this fight before it was announced that they would be fighting for the BMF because this fight did get booked before they sort of brought that up to that championship standard per se. But it's just a title that I don't want to call it meaningless, but what does it mean? It's very confusing, right? And especially if they're going to start defending it now. I don't know if that's the case, but anyways, not a big fan of the whole BMF thing beyond Nate Diaz versus Jorge Masvidal. But still, the performance was amazing. The finish was great. I loved it. It was a fantastic showing by Justin Gaethje, who is showing that at this point in his career, someone that's pretty developed, pretty already in his mold, he's showing new wrinkles to his game. He's not changing or reinventing the wheel drastically, but just fighting a lot more measured, a lot more poised, a lot more intelligent. And I feel like that was one of his biggest things. He will sometimes take unnecessary risks. And here, obviously, I think he will always take risks. That's his style, but they seem to be a little bit more calculated, and it's paying off. Clearly, a much improved, a much better fighter this time around than the version compared in 2018. And I think he just punched himself a ticket to a title shot. I know that for a while we were talking about Volkanovski challenging at 155 for a second time, especially if Makhachev wins. But I don't know. That knockout inspired a lot. And I kind of want to see Gaethje get another crack at the belt. I do feel like I kind of discarded his chances of becoming champion after, coming up short against Oliveira as well as Khabib. But nowadays, can you rule him out? No, you can. I mean, I would certainly have Makhachev or Oliveira as favorites as of now. We'd have to see how they look come October because that could change things as well. But certainly, I see the fight a lot more even now with this performance in mind than before. So I'm all for Justin Gaethje making another title run, and I think he should be next. Low-key kind of want to see him fight for the belt before Volkanovski does, just because I like having an order in things, and I think 155 belt should be defended for the most part against 155 contenders.
All right, so you kind of answered some questions for me. I appreciate it, Danny. So you say you think Gaethje, I'll stay with you, Gaethje versus Oliveira and Makhachev, Gaethje would be an underdog is what you're saying against either one, right?
As of now, right? They could fight and look terrible, or like the winner could look terrible, right?
Yeah.
And then you go, okay, maybe things change. But as of now, yeah, he would certainly be the underdog, but I don't think by a ton. You look at what Gaethje does, knocking out Poirier. I mean, the last time Poirier suffered a stoppage loss of that manner was against Michael Johnson, I think back in like 2016. So, it's been a while. Like to do that to Poirier is damn impressive, especially as Goes and Farah mentioned, it wasn't the cleanest shot. Like Poirier got to block a good chunk of it, and yet it still knocked him out. So, yeah, I mean, can you really discard him against Oliveira or Makhachev? I think it'd be extremely silly and foolish to do so. So, yeah, I'm all
and
for
in your
that.
opinion, you think he's ahead of Volkanovski now in the pecking order. Once the other two solve their problem, he's ahead, you're saying?
Yeah. I do like champ versus champ fights so long as both champions have cleared their divisions or at least a good chunk of it. And there's no, deserving contenders waiting in line or waiting to get screwed over for a shot at somebody else in a lower weight classes or higher, depending on if the champion's obviously moving up. But in this case, we got Ilia Topuria, who I think we can all agree he's pretty damn deserving of the shot at 145. And then at 155, we got Gaethje as well. And let's not forget that fight, champion versus champion fight between Islam and Volkanovski. It was this year. Like, we're not talking about a fight that went on like a couple of years ago. Like, we just saw it. So I think it is wise to have some distance between those two fights. One more defense from each. I think that makes sense.
Don't you guys feel like Makhachev really has to come out and make a statement in this fight? Because it's hard to say his name without attaching it to Volkanovski, who is a featherweight. If you look at Justin Gaethje's game, you look at it and you go, well, I think he could do a lot of things Volkanovski did in that fight. Like, it's hard to kind of separate those two. But I want to keep something going. I want to ask Danny this because we had this conversation on MMA Junkie Radio. I'm not a big BMF fan either. I think in the end it kind of worked out. I guess the fans love it. But is part of it the fact that Justin and Dustin were just such nice guys? Because at the end of the day, anybody that goes in the cage, they're all BMFs, right? This is their career choice. Like, this is pretty insane to go in there and do this month after month. I feel like they're all BMFs. So you need something a little extra that makes you not just afraid of them in the cage, but outside of the cage, where you walk up to them and you go, oh my God, can I please have a photo with you? They didn't really have that edge. I think that's where this kind of failed a little bit.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, that was the whole spirit of the Nate Diaz versus Jorge Masvidal fight. It was like this, street style that they both carried, like this sort of OG, and anything can happen anytime, anywhere, and it just seemed perfect. It just seemed perfect for that specific fight. I don't think, again, Justin and Dustin, two badasses. How many fight of the night and performance of the night bonuses do they have together? A ton, but it goes beyond that, right? And if they brought it back once, it'd be kind of weird and awkward if it's just twice now, right? Like, they're definitely gonna, whenever they're in need of a championship fight, I think they're gonna have that BMF calling card. And more often than not, if you're fighting in the main event of a UFC, or if you're worthy enough to headline a UFC pay-per-view without an actual undisputed championship belt on the line, you're probably a BMF. Like, you're a damn good fighter, right? Whoever that is. So they're always going to have that excuse, like, well, look at this guy. He does knockouts. He's done a fight of the night. And I don't know. I'm just not a big fan of it, but I love the fight.
I think both guys and most people do kind of think it's corny if it's not the right two guys. But the minute they brought up pay-per-view points, you notice Poirier and Gaethje are both like, yeah, what's up? What's up? Like, all of a sudden they got grimy and dirty and street on everyone. Yeah. But hey, solid fight. They're 1-1. And so let me go to Pereira here with some follow-ups that I got. All right. What do we do next with Gaethje in the meantime? In October, we got Makhachev versus Oliveira. I don't even think Gaethje wants to be the sub, honestly, and go down there and weigh in. At least that's what it sounds like to me, although money talks, we shall see. So we probably isn't going to fight till later, and we don't know how things might unfold. We don't know if that'll be a classic, and they'll be 1-1, and they got to run it 3 times. Who knows? Para, of course, Connie Mack was at it again, the swagger jacker that he is on fight night. He says now he wants Gaethje, almost kind of given the Heisman. Let me give my Heisman into Chandler. What are your thoughts on that? Are you warm to Gaethje versus McGregor? I mean, I know it'd be a classic fight, but restore some order to this division. What do you think should happen?
No, if I'm Justin Gaethje, I wait 100%. I mean, he's just he's cemented himself a title shot. It looks like Volkanovski is probably going to fight Ilia Topuria next. So if you're Justin Gaethje, absolutely wait. He did say he does not want to weigh in as a backup. He doesn't mind going to Abu Dhabi to watch the fight, but he said he's not interested in being an official backup for the fight. At this point in Justin Gaethje's career, it's rare to get this many title opportunities, and he's such a great fighter, but he's just fallen short of the undisputed title, just like Dustin Poirier. So when you position yourself like that, especially that it didn't even take that much damage against Dustin, at this point in your career, you wait. Now, a fight with Conor McGregor, would it equal to millions of pay-per-views and millions in your bank account? Sure. But that's a fight I feel like he could have after the title shot. You never know. So Conor McGregor is smart. He knows how to promote. We always see him tweeting after every event. And if Justin Gaethje just kind of cemented himself as a #1 contender, I get why Conor McGregor would tweet at him, because it's kind of like win-win situation for Conor if he were to fight against Justin. I mean, I spoke to Conor's manager in London, and I told him, is it a lot of lightweights keep telling Chandler, forget about Conor because you're not getting that fight. And he said Conor is focused on Michael Chandler, but it's not 100% going to happen. His attention could sway somewhere else. And here we see it with Justin Gaethje. He does kind of have the BMF belt, which people are looking as a promotional tool, but it's fun. And Conor's a guy who can easily headline a non-title fight. So, I guess BMF would be a different type of title fight. But yeah, I mean, Conor knows what he's doing. I would like to see that stylistically. It would be a lot of fun, but Gaethje didn't seem too entertained by it. He said, I'm not going to fight somebody who's on steroids. He turned me down 6 times and whatnot. So if I'm Justin Gaethje, 100%, I just wait for that title shot. I get what Conor McGregor is doing here. And like I said, this is a fight that Gaethje could have in the near future. He just doesn't seem that interested in having it. So Gaethje, I think, should just wait.
How about you, Goes? We just sat through like the last 8-10 Tuesdays watching McGregor and Chandler. We finally got our moment where he shoves them. Do we preserve that? Or are you kind of open to maybe a Gaethje McGregor possibility while the lightweight division sorts itself out at the top?
I think you have to preserve it. What's the point of making us sit through all that if we're not going to see that fight? And I honestly feel like Conor McGregor's comments are more just to take a jab at Michael Chandler to bother him a little bit, because obviously if you're watching Tough, it's not going Conor McGregor's way. He needs some ammunition. But the Justin Gaethje matchup, like, nobody thinks it's weird that we never really hear Justin Gaethje's mouth come out of Conor's mouth for like the longest time. Like, I think it's the worst matchup he could possibly have. I feel like Justin Gaethje will just beat up on that lead leg. Him throwing from so many different angles like that. I just think this is a bad matchup for Conor McGregor. If I'm Conor McGregor, I leave Justin Gaethje's name out of my mouth.
All right. Guys, Gaethje now holds 3 belts: the WSOF belt with some title defenses, the UFC interim belt, and now the BMF. Did he just cement himself as a Hall of Famer? That's my extra question to you guys. Let's go to Danny first.
I'd like to have sort of a bit more of or I'd like to see a bit of a bigger or tougher filter to get into the UFC Hall of Fame. The UFC Hall of Fame, or just any Hall of Fame, sounds very prestigious, right? And you should do a lot. Like, you should literally be able to define an entire era within your run, within your legacy, in order to be there. That's how I kind of see it. But the UFC just seems to have a bit of a more lax policy. So, like, if someone like Donald Cerrone finds himself in the Hall of Fame, obviously Justin Gaethje has to be there. He's done more within the UFC and has had more relevant wins and has seemed to mark the landscape a lot more than Donald Cerrone, even though he might not be personality-wise as big as Cerrone, but sporting-wise, there's no doubt his legacy is bigger. So I'd like to see and wait what else he does in his career. But I guess under that current criteria, I'd say yeah. But I kind of... The guy's career is not done yet, right? Like, you can even argue like his better days are ahead, right? Like, whatever comes next is going to be big, is going to be important. So I guess let's wait and see.
All right, how about you guys? What are your thoughts? That's 3 belts that he has, and he's the highlight, and he's got a lot of bonuses. He's kind of carved out a special place in the lightweight division.
Yeah, that's the thing, is the UFC hasn't really drawn that line. Like, right now, all we have to go off of is Donald Cerrone is your benchmark. And if that's your benchmark, then I don't see why Justin Gaethje doesn't get in. I mean, he has a win over him, and his career has been pretty damn good overall, even going back to World Series of Fighting, what he was able to accomplish there. So, when we talk about some of the greatest fights in history, he's got some of those. So I think for sure he gets in, but I think he'll even cement that even more with some of the upcoming fights.
By the way, folks, Gaethje versus Palomino 1 at WSOF. Watch that one if you haven't watched it. I mean, if you think you've watched all the Gaethje fights, and there's some great ones out there. Alvarez, the first Poirier fight. Check out that one. That one's a treat. Fada, how about you? Does he get into your Hall of Fame with these accolades that he has under his belt?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the same thing. If, like both Danny and Ghost said, if Donald Cerrone's made it to the Hall of Fame, I think, this goes back to what Daniel Cormier was kind of arguing about when talking about Jim Miller. If they've kind of lowered the criteria in that regard, then Justin's won an interim title. He's holds wins over now Dustin, Michael Chandler. He's put himself together a good career, and he's still continuing to notch wins. And who knows, could be undisputed champion at some point in his career. So yeah, I mean, I would assume that he would have a place in the Hall of Fame.
All right, fair enough. I think he's in. But that's years ahead of us still. He still have more fights to give us. All right, folks, listen, if you're watching live here, welcome. We're live every Monday, and you can participate in the show via this chat room here. Ask a question, leave a comment. The sharp questions get priority, like Norman Dale said in the movie Hoosiers. Make it a good one, Strap. and you'll make it here onto the show. Joseph Moses says, I was surprised in a good way. This was an early finish. I know Justin said that he didn't think he could turn it around for 294, but he looked like he wasn't even in a fight with Dustin. Joseph, I'll answer this one because the gang already addressed this. He just is not interested in turning it around in time for Abu Dhabi, even though we're still a full 2 months and 3 weeks away. He just does not want to do it. He'll await the winner of Oliveira versus Makhachev. MMA Events Vlog says, what's up, guys? What's up, MMA Events Vlog? Anthony says, am I wrong, or was it to the back of the head and the neck kick? Justin never came close to shin versus chin. It's fucking bullshit. Anybody want to address that one? I understand what he's saying because we always talk about the back of the head. Anybody want to address that one from Anthony?
That was a clean head kick knockout, in my opinion. I mean, there was nothing illegal about that. Not even Dustin Poirier complained about it. So
yeah, he hits the ear. Pretty much, if you hit the ear, even your hand strike is not going to be illegal. So some of the foot comes in from the torque of the actual, well, first of all, the foot is going to bend a little bit once it connects with the head. So yeah, that's a legal strike, Anthony. I answered it only because, and so did Danny, just because, hey, there's a lot of new fans that come along from time to time. So we're not just going to clown anyone that asks. Well, yeah, that was a legal strike, Anthony. I'm going to get the papers.
It's different. It's difficult, too, with head kicks because, your intuition is to turn your jaw, right? So a lot of times people always say turn into it a little bit. That's why it seems like it hits you in the back of the head. But no, there was nothing wrong with that one.
Yeah, usually even if in a punch, if anything gets the ear, it's legal, even if 90% of it lands towards the back. You touch some of the ear and you're good. Anyway, here's one more. Scott Christian. I feel like many thought that this might be Justin's swan song, but it turns out it might be Dustin's downward slide. What do you guys think? Anybody agree with that?
We will only find out until he actually returns, and then we see how he looks in his next outing, right? I would say no, right? This wasn't like a Justin Gaethje, Tony Ferguson style beating where, we just felt uncomfortable at one point and it had to get stopped, right? And it was just round after round. It wasn't an accumulation. Dustin took a few shots in the first round, but he ate them well. And then, he did get knocked out pretty cleanly in the second. So I would like to say no, but there are no guarantees. Both of these guys have put an incredible amount of mileage on their bodies, on their chins, on their brain, that it just takes one knockout sometimes, one punch for the rest of the career to look a different way. So we'll find out. We'll find out whenever he returns. I wouldn't rule it out, but I don't think that's the most likely scenario.
In fact, let's dive into it a little bit more here in topic number 2. So the losing participant in the BMF title fight was Dustin Poirier. Tough loss for him, but because of his past successes, he does have some options if he does not want to fight rising title contenders. So like Fiziev, Gamrot, and some of the others that are climbing Sarukian. So advise Poirier on his next move. Goes, what would you tell him? I mean, he's got some options there. What do you tell him?
Well, for sure, some time off. That was a brutal KO. We all know the repercussions of bad KOs don't always show up immediately, right? Sometimes it takes a while before you really realize just how messed up you are. But some of the names that he's been attached to in the past, like Nate Diaz, I'd like to see what happens with Nate Diaz this weekend and see if he even has a hunger to come back to mixed martial arts. And if that's through the UFC, if he does, then I think that's kind of a decent fight where I don't think Dustin Poirier feels like he's putting somebody over or anything like that. I think it's a fight that a lot of people were pretty interested in when they brought it up the first time. Another name is like Beneil Dariush. He was attached to him for a little while, maybe a fight, something like that. Those types of fights I think are something that could kind of answer the question that Danny was asking, right? Like, let's see where he's at exactly. And I don't think it's end all be all for Dustin Poirier. Justin Gaethje's a tough guy. Most people that get hit with that kick are gonna go out. And Dustin's shown that, when he's been KO'd before, he can come back even stronger. So we'll have to see. But it's interesting with that division because you look at the top guys, and a lot of them feel like they're 1, maybe 2 fights away from calling it quits. And maybe that could be Dustin Poirier's time. We don't know, but we won't know until he gets that next assignment. But we know we'll get what we always get out of Dustin Poirier, and that's 100%. The guy always comes in shape. He always comes to fight. When it's time for him to call it quits, I think he'll know, and I think he'll do it there in the cage.
All right, Danny, you're next, and allow me to play devil's advocate. So Goes is saying time off, but isn't that what we said to Alex Pereira? And now look at him; he might be in a title fight because he rolled the dice, and he got a win just 3 months after that vicious loss to Izzy.
In terms of who? Sorry,
Dustin Poirier. Next move.
Yeah. Look, he is 1-1 with Gaethje, right? Like if he's just able, and he's got a big name, as all of you guys mentioned, if he's able to just notch 1 or 2 victories, who knows? Like if Justin Gaethje does become champion, I mean, I think the UFC would love to do a trilogy bout for the undisputed belt. That would be huge. I mean, just the fact that these two headlined a UFC pay-per-view without an undisputed title on the line means, you know, that they are a draw, that they can put some buys on that pay-per-view. So yeah, I don't think the chances for him fighting for a title have completely closed. He's a very exciting fighter. He's a big name, so there's a lot of options for him. I do think obviously the door does shut a little bit, but I do think he still has a chance of fighting for an undisputed belt in the future, depending on how things shake out in the division. So I would just suggest, again, long break, just because, you know, those type of knockouts are quite scary, and you do want to make sure that you're in the right state of mind and your health is quite well. You don't want to roll the dice. I would actually say that what Poatan did is ill-advised, but it worked out for him. And then just kind of wait and see what happens this weekend also with Nate Diaz and Jake Paul. Nate Diaz and Dustin Poirier were booked briefly for a point in time. A lot of people were excited about that fight. Nate Diaz has said it over and over. He's going to go do his thing with Jake Paul, and then he wants to re-sign with the UFC. If he wins, becomes an even bigger star, re-signs with the UFC. We don't know what the hell is going on with Conor, so that might not even be a thing, you know, so long he doesn't go into the USADA testing pool. I think Dustin Poirier would be a good opponent for Diaz. Diaz has previously signed a contract to fight him before, so I think it could happen, or at least verbally agreed to fight him. So that'd be a huge fight for Poirier, and again, it would just kind of keep him in the realm of title contention. So it's not doom and gloom for Dustin Poirier.
All right, Fatah Hanoun, last one. Advise Dustin Poirier on his next move. He's a big star. He's got some options.
Here's the issue. Dustin Poirier said he's not interested in fighting rising contenders. He kind of just wants the big names. And he mentioned even prior to the Gaethje rematch that Beneil Dariush didn't really interest him. And when you look at the rankings, there aren't too many available options. You've got Rafael Fiziev, who's going to fight Mateusz Gamrot. Gamrot's a teammate of Dustin Poirier. And when I think Fiziev style-wise would interest Dustin Poirier. I don't know name-wise, but if he does beat Gamrot, that would be an option. But I don't know if that would entice Dustin Poirier. So right now, I think it's the waiting game for Dustin. Just see how the rest of the lightweight division plays out. And again, if Gaethje is going to fight for the undisputed title, if he falls short, the trilogy's there. Like Danny mentioned, Nate Diaz, if he makes his way back to the UFC, that's definitely a fight that's going to get him excited. So Dustin Poirier, it's a waiting game right now. It depends what happens with Oliveira and Islam Makhachev. If Oliveira loses to Makhachev again, do they do that rematch? I think Oliveira is a name that would excite Dustin Poirier because he's going to want to avenge that loss. So if you're Dustin Poirier and you're looking for those big fights and those big names, you just got to wait. Because right now, when you look at the rankings, absolutely nothing makes sense in terms of what he's looking for. If you're just looking at it purely rankings, Beneil Dariush makes perfect sense. But he did say in the past that he wasn't too interested in Dariush. I don't think he'd be any more interested right now. So if he's not interested in the Dariush and the Fiziev, if Fiziev can get past Gamrot, it's a waiting game for Dustin Poirier and see who's available. And it makes sense for him to take some time off after a knockout loss.
Yeah. The waiting game probably makes the most sense. You're right. I think just it opens up new paths. And just this weekend alone, we'll see more with Nate Diaz. Go ahead, Danny.
Yeah, also, let's not discard the idea of maybe something at 170. He told me before in the past that before his career's done with, he sees himself doing some fights at 170 pounds. We got Luque versus RDA. You know, if RDA is a good name, if he wins, maybe that could be a possibility, you know, down the line. So, you know, maybe there's something at 170 as well.
Hey, is this crazy? What if the UFC does sign Michael Venom Page? Just him versus Poirier at 170.
Yeah. Again, yeah, those are, if he's into big fights, interesting fights, I think that'd be one of them for sure.
I wonder if he would
What?
look at Page as a young guy, rising guy versus the established star that he was at Bellator. Go ahead, Fada. You want to answer that one?
Yeah, I'm saying like if he's gonna do 170, which I'm not sure because he said that this was one of his most seamless cuts to 155. So Dustin seems content right now. But again, your mindset changes. They were talking to him right after the fight, and he said he had a seamless cut to 55. So he could have a different opinion later. But Wonderboy Thompson's another name that if he were to go up to 170, but I don't know who it was on Twitter that posted a picture of it was Poirier and Chiesa and two other 70 pounders, and they're like, look, I mean, Dustin does not look big in front of these guys, so they're like, cut that notion of saying that Dustin's a quote unquote weight bully or whatnot. He would not be big at 170. That's a comment somebody made. So it
That's
seems
true.
like he's okay. He'd be okay at 155 if he's okay making the cut. But if you ask Dustin Poirier 3-4 months from now, he could have a different answer.
Mm-hmm. All right. Let's move on to the next topic here. Alex Fajeda defeated Jan Blachowicz via split decision. There was talk that this fight should produce at least one of the two fighters who will compete for the vacant light heavyweight title. As you all know, Jamal Hill relinquished the title because of a serious injury to his Achilles heel. So, in your eyes, did Fajeda accomplish that? Meaning, should he be one of the two that fights for the vacant title? How did you score the fight is my other question to you all. And over the weekend, we did get some news. Johnny Walker and Magomed Ankalaev will be fighting at UFC 294 in Abu Dhabi. I bring that up because those are two big names, and I imagine they might be part of this equation. Danny, you're first.
Yeah, he has to be, right? Like you're talking about a former champion at middleweight coming up, defeating a former champion at 205. He's got to be next. And it's not like we're in a division that's full of contenders and there's tons of options. You know, Jamal Hill had to vacate his belt. Glover retired. A lot of fighters are coming off losses. Prochazka also vacated his belt, but it seems that, he's on his way to recovery. So I think Poatan has to be one of the two that end up fighting for that vacant belt. I think ideally you would want Prochazka just because he was the original champion that won the belt, never lost it, and had to vacate it. So he's probably seen as the best 205er right now. So I think, and plus action-wise, like Poatan versus Prochazka, it sounds like a lot of fun. So I'm all in. I think that's option number one. But we do not know, or at least I don't know if Prochazka has posted any update on his recovery. We know that he should be towards the end of his recovery, but sometimes, these things can extend, and who knows, maybe he's just ready to start training again. Who knows if he can actually endure a training camp and fight fairly soon. I think the other option, and obviously that changed with his booking with Ankalaev and Johnny Walker, but I thought Johnny Walker would have been a phenomenal choice. He's in the top 10, 3-fight winning streak. Brazilian as well. You could do this fight in Brazil. He has a really weird style, so it lends itself for a very interesting fight. And that'd be a huge fight in Brazil. So I think that would have been a solid B option. Obviously, game is still on the table if he does his job in his next outing. So we'll see about that. But certainly, Poatan has to be next in the vacant title fight that they're going to book at some point in the future here at light heavyweight.
Sorry, I'm laughing because just as you said, I think Johnny Walker should be in. It's almost like he reacted to you because cold coffee goes to the B-roll, and you got Johnny Walker there dancing. Delighted to hear what Danny Segura's take is on all this. All right, Fada, how about you?
That was a live shot, by the way.
What's that?
That was a live shot, by the way, of Johnny Walker.
Danny, what was your score? Did you give me your score on the fight? Did you agree with the judges?
Yeah, I agreed. I had it 29. Well, with two of them, I had it 29-28 for Pereira. Clearly, he lost the first round. There's no doubt about that. And I thought he did the most damage in rounds 2 and 3. There is a case to be made that this should have been a draw. I don't know how you guys feel about it, and you should weigh in. But I've had several people reach out to me and be like, that first round should have been a 10-8. I don't agree with it. I don't think there was enough damage for it to get pushed to 10-8, but there was a ton of control. I mean, it was clearly a very, very dominant round from Jan Blachowicz. But yeah, he scored a 29-28 for Pereira.
Yeah, in that round, he did have dominance and duration. He didn't have damage. And the rules state that if 2 of the 3 are present, you should consider a 10-8. Not automatically it is a 10-8. Only you should consider a 10-8. But what we've heard and what Goes and I shared in our watch along is usually if one of the two of the three is damaged, then the 10-8 is more like, here it goes, it's floating out there, right? But because it wasn't, it's now a should consider. Now the rules don't explicitly say it like that, but that's just what we've been told by some of the people that we kind of talk to, I guess. Fada, what were your thoughts? Give me your score. And also, Pereira, do you think he cemented himself as one of the two participants, Jiri Prochazka being another one, a former champ who had to relinquish, he didn't lose anything, and then of course a new title booking at UFC 294?
Yeah, I scored a 29-28 for Pereira. I thought round one was very clearly Jan Blachowicz. It wasn't enough for me for a 10-8 just because of the damage thing that you were talking about. Maybe if he had some heavier ground and pound or really secured that choke for a while and had him in deep trouble. But he did have him in some really bad positions. Round two was Pereira's, and then round three, I felt Pereira edged it. I felt like the late takedown by Blachowicz wasn't enough. What didn't help Blachowicz was his body language, in my opinion.
Yes.
Clearly, the altitude got to him. Yeah, his body language did not help him. Even after the fight, Pereira had his hands raised. Blachowicz was sitting down looking exhausted. That stuff never looks good in front of the judges. So I think one of the most things that really hurt Jan Blachowicz was his body language. Round two, I thought he was on the brink of getting finished because of how tired he looked. I wasn't sure why Pereira didn't put his foot on the gas pedal more, probably because maybe lunging forward was maybe going to take him down, or maybe he was going to get tired himself. But I thought Pereira missed his opportunity in round two to try to finish the fight. But nonetheless, Blachowicz's body language was not good in round two. So I scored that for Pereira. Is he one half of the vacant title fight? I think so. The UFC is a business. They know when you look at the top guys in the rankings. Now we've got Ankalaev and Johnny Walker. I mean, I hate that Ankalaev gets kind of lost in all of this shuffle because he's so quiet and isn't very outspoken on the mic, and his comments after the Blachowicz fight where something along the lines of not wanting to be in the UFC anymore. I'm sure that didn't help his case, but now he's fighting Johnny Walker. I think if he beats Johnny Walker, he should be part of a title fight. I just don't think he's next. I don't know when Prochazka is going to be back, but business-wise, it makes all the sense in the world for the UFC to go Pereira and Prochazka. I think that's a fight that could easily sell stylistically, a fight that's going to get a lot of fans excited.
Yeah. All right. So I'm glad you brought up the body language. Another thing was when Blachowicz did get time on top due to his takedowns, he just didn't mount offense. He looked so exhausted there. And fighters, please, if you get booked to Salt Lake City, get there like a month in advance, because getting there 10 days in advance or that extra week, I'm still seeing exhaustion. I think exhaustion may have cost Jan Blachowicz that fight as much as any of the other factors. How about you guys? Share your thoughts, your card, that you turned in for this fight, and then what do you think about Pereira? Did he cement himself as one of the two?
I think he definitely did. Night of, I actually thought Blachowicz had won the fight. And then I went back and I watched it, and I do agree Pereira, I think, won the fight. We did kind of bring up the 10-8 in our watch long, and it was that feeling of we don't feel like it's a 10-8, but you feel like maybe one of the three judges might do it. So you really had no idea what was going to get called there at the end of the fight. But, I mean, I'm glad you guys kind of brought this up. Like, I feel like if that fight took place anywhere out of altitude, that probably would have been a Jan Blachowicz night. I still feel like Pereira has some holes that he has to address. He's gotten a little better with the takedown defense, but it's not 100% there. And so I think if you're the UFC, you have to look at it as a business. It seems like they really like this guy, and I think you need to give him that position right now. Jiri makes too much sense. I think those two guys, you put them together, it's going to be fireworks. It's a great fight. It just feels like they're the ones that are leading right now, and I'll be honest, I think I might actually lean towards Pereira in that fight.
Yeah, and as a former champ, I just think, and especially willing to fight so quick, he scored some points this weekend. So I think he's going to definitely be one of the two for sure. I consider Prochazka just out until he declares himself back in. Of course, he could do that via fight booking, but I think the winner of the fight in Abu Dhabi will fight Pereira until, again, we hear that Prochazka's in. But maybe you all have better context than I do. I just haven't heard that he's officially back. I keep hearing that, he's training and, the kind of the stuff that you normally hear. Is he part of Team Audi or is he with Tim? Do you know, Fada? You just talked to Audi.
He's with Tim. He's part of Tim's group.
Yeah, so that management boutique kind of split in two there. All right. Well, look, we'll just worry about it when we find out what the next one is. We just go off the info on hand. Topic 4: Derrick Lewis defeated Marcos Rogerio de Lima via TKO. A jumping switch, knee kick, knee strike got things going for the Black Beast. 33 seconds in, and it was all over. Then we learned about Lewis's free agent status along with his hot balls. So guys, I want to know how what kind of urgency should the UFC have in re-signing this guy? I heard Salt Lake City was just popping for this guy from the minute of the walkout to him winning to everything he was saying. They were hanging on his every word. This guy's a star no matter what. Or should he test free agency and pursue the big fights that are out there? Fada, back to you for the first take.
It's tough, right? Because Derrick Lewis said he wants to stay with the UFC, and Derrick Lewis has proven to be a guy that can be a star on his own. It doesn't really matter who the dance partner is. This guy's fought everybody. That's my only concern. Like, who's left for him to fight in the UFC? And he said he has another title run left in him, but this guy has fought kind of the rising stars, the Sergey Pavlovich. He's fought for the interim belt. He's fought Francis Ngannou. He's fought everybody. So I just wonder who's really left for him to fight in the UFC. But seeing what he said, wanting to re-sign the UFC, having another title run in him, I think the UFC should re-sign him. He stole the show, and it's crazy to think that this guy was on the prelims and then he got bumped up to the main card after the cancellation of Wonder Boy's fight, and look what he did. This guy knows how to capitalize on his mic time and even media day. This guy is just very unintentionally funny. Had the crowd on their feet. His post-fight celebration was hilarious. So, yeah, I mean, if you're the UFC, you want to re-sign Derrick Lewis. Now, of course, everybody's talking about the Francis Ngannou rematch and him, that's the guy. That's the guy that should fight Francis Ngannou in the PFL and MMA. But what after for Derrick Lewis is the question. So it's like, if Derrick Lewis was looking to call it a career really, really soon, because he's talking about title runs. If he's saying he has another title run in him, does not sound like a man who has 1 or 2 fights left in him. But if he were to call it a career very soon, then yes, I would say Ngannou's the right play. Make a big bag. Doesn't matter what the outcome is. Get out. But if he's talking about wanting to stay in the UFC and having another title run in him, does not sound like a man who's done fighting. So that's why I'd say if you're the UFC, you want to re-sign this guy. He's a star. He's entertaining. Company leader for most knockouts in UFC history. He's reclaimed that. I'm sure he doesn't mind putting a few more so he could be ahead of the race.
Mm-hmm. All right. Goes, how about you? What are your thoughts, man? He's got some abs too. Let's not forget. Taking it more serious now.
For sure. I mean, look, Francis Ngannou may not be fighting in the UFC, but he's still making an impact on the UFC's bottom line, right? Like, this is one of the first times where we feel like we're going to have that Ngannou effect. It's raised his head for the UFC because now they have a decision to make. And I think that's kind of interesting that Derrick Lewis even brings that up in his post-fight speech. I mean, we all know an opponent of Francis Ngannou is going to get at least $2 million, right? That's a big deal. And George, how many times has Derrick Lewis told us to our face? He almost threw me off of that boat in Virginia for asking. The belt to him just doesn't mean anything. It's all about making money. And this is a good opportunity for him to make money. So what do you do now if you're the UFC? I think you have to sign him. I think you have to send that message. If you do that, you take somebody off of that plate for the PFL. It forces them to find somebody else to kind of make people want to tune in and watch Francis Ngannou fight. If Derrick does go to the PFL and he gets a win, I think there's just no way you don't do the rematch, right? You put that much money into Francis Ngannou, you got to do that. And I have to imagine, again, that's another $2 million. That's $4 million that that Derrick Lewis could possibly make over there. So it's really interesting what's going on here and to see the effect that this is finally going to have on the UFC and for fighters. Like, really, the people that are winning right now are the fighters in general, right? Because now you're starting to see a little bit of change. Now there is some discussion. So we'll have to see what Derrick Lewis decides on doing. If the UFC is going to sign him or re-sign him, they're going to have to offer him. They're not going to give him $2 million, but they're going to have to give him something that makes him happy. And sometimes that's hard to do with Derrick Lewis. So it's going to be real interesting to see going forward. But that Francis Ngannou effect, it's here, and we're going to see this happen more often.
Danny, you're what we call a tiebreaker. Fada thinks he's maybe going to stay in the UFC. Goes is thinking he should start looking elsewhere, like the PFL. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, this is a tough one. And there are some key details that I think we're missing here. I wonder if the UFC just let Derrick Lewis' contract expire and then they'll just negotiate like once they have a result in hand. Because remember, going into this event, he was 1-4 in his past 5 fights. And I believe all the losses were finishes. So, it's not like he was looking great either entering this fight. And we're kind of forgetting about this because of this crazy flying knee knockout with Marcos Rogerio de Lima here. But I think that vastly changed the narrative. If he would have lost here, I think the narrative would have been completely different. And maybe there wouldn't have been that much appeal to see him against Francis Ngannou. But now things are vastly different. So I wonder if the UFC let the contract expire or if they actually actively try to re-sign Derrick Lewis. And he's like, you know what? I heard the news of Ngannou. I want to test free agency and see what my fortune turns out to be by fighting out the contract. So I think that's a key detail, because if he did choose not to re-sign with the UFC and a contract was offered prior to this UFC 291 fight, maybe he does really want to go to PFL, and maybe he's just saying, hey, UFC, I want to stay here to see if the UFC adds some zeros to his check. But certainly with a big possibility or a big interest in entertaining the idea of moving over to PFL. But I would agree with Goes. I would side with Goes here. Like, yes, he said he's got another title run in him, but at the same time, if you look at Derrick Lewis, he is the definition of a prize fighter. He doesn't really care a ton about the belt. He cares about the belt in the sense that it'll bring him more money. But if he can make money without the belt, he's also fine with that. Also, he's had tons of injuries in the past with his back. He says that his health is good now, but those injuries usually don't go away, right? He's also risking his health every time he steps in there. He's got almost 40 professional fights. So I don't think he actually wants to stick around for a very long time. He just wants to make as much money as possible. And if he can do that against Francis Ngannou in just one fight or two fights, maybe fight somebody else at PFL after that, I think he'd be ready to do that and call it quits. Also, I think the $2 million were sort of a base minimum to any opponent that is given to Francis Ngannou. But Derrick Lewis is not just any opponent. This guy has headlined 10 UFC events, clearly one of the biggest names current at heavyweight in MMA, and has history with Francis Ngannou. They have some bad blood. Remember, those that build up to that fight. The fight might have not been good, but there was some bad blood, some heated aspects to the fight. So I think now with Ngannou, certainly an elevated status, Derrick Lewis as well. Plus, I don't think the fight would play out the same way the first one would do. I would assume that the PFL is just going to write whatever check possible, more than $2 million, to make this fight happen, because it's the best possible scenario that they have. Literally, like, outside of John Jones and maybe Pavlovich, but even then, Pavlovich is not nearly as known as Derrick Lewis. Really, I would say outside of John Jones and maybe a trilogy with Stipe, who else would be the most interesting challenger for Francis Ngannou in MMA? I'd actually argue that's Derrick Lewis.
Mm-hmm. Okay. In the chat, John Wayne says he's going to go for that Francis money. Joseph Moses says the UFC would only re-sign Derrick because they need bodies at heavyweight. Derrick was willing to fight anybody at any time. I think the statement performance will make the UFC re-sign him. King James says Lewis is too popular to go. Richie Elger says Lewis has one more run before leaving the UFC. He also says Aspinall versus Lewis. Has that happened yet? It has not happened. I wouldn't mind seeing that one, honestly. Thank you, guys. I'll see if I can get to more comments in the chat. And I know Facebook chatters are available to us. So if you're watching on Facebook, hit us up with a question, comment. I'll try and get you guys in. Also, right now is a good time for me to politely ask, hit that like and subscribe for this video. It goes a long way with triggering the algorithm. YouTube be tripping, you know what I mean? So if you do that, kind of circulates it, populates it, gets us closer to the front page on YouTube. And there's this little bell there. If you hit it, it'll tell you when we're live. So do that as well for us. You can count on us every Monday, live, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Spinning Back Clique, we discuss all the big stories in MMA. And again, you can be a part of the show, leaving a comment or a question. We shall continue, though. We got a little bit more to get to. The fight that didn't happen kind of had us talking as well. Stephen Thompson versus Michelle Pereira. So let's take you back to Friday morning at the official weigh-ins. Pereira missed weight by 3 pounds. We were all gutted after finding out about Pereira's weight miss, and we had to wait a few hours, and we found out later in the day that the fight was off. And so it's unfortunate, and there's something to this. Let me tell you what Stephen Thompson said. via Instagram. Unfortunately, my fight with Michelle Pereira will no longer be going forward. First off, I'm sorry to all the fans that were looking forward to my fight. I'm gutted for my coaches, my family, and all the people who helped me throughout the camp to be ready and prepared to go to battle. I made weight this morning as I've done every fight during my 11 and a half year UFC career. My opponent did not. This isn't the first time I've had an opponent miss weight, and given how it played out previously, myself and my team ultimately felt that it wasn't smart for us to move forward with the fight. At my age and given what I've accomplished in the sport, I'm not here to be a gatekeeper. I'm here to fight for and to win the UFC welterweight title. When I step into the octagon, no one's there but me and my opponent. This isn't a video game. Both of us are putting our health and our careers on the line. If I don't finish my opponent, I risk losing a decision, even if it's a split decision, as what happened when I fought Darren Till. And almost the same scenario played out then. If you guys remember, when he fought Till in Liverpool, Till actually was 174.5. So he was even a bigger cat. And it didn't work out for him. Fighters, he continues, fighters who miss weight face far too few consequences and are often allowed to fight with a significant competitive advantage. This appears to be happening more and more these days. Hopefully the decision to not move forward with the fight will discourage others from missing weight in the future. I also hope to encourage fighters that face this situation to follow suit and not allow this to happen to them. I'm healthy, and I will look to get back in the octagon ASAP, but on the level playing field as I continue my quest of winning the UFC welterweight title. So that's from Stephen Thompson. Stephen, a note from me, please use paragraphs going forward. That was a tough read for me. But yeah, guys, what were your thoughts on this? And according to our colleague Mike Bond, he did not even get paid his show money, even though he weighed in and made weight. He elected not to take the fight. So my question to you guys is, the UFC not being so understanding here, was that fair or foul on their end? And even from Stephen Thompson, were you happy with his decision or not? Goes, you first.
I think it's foul for the UFC. It's a foul. But what they're doing, I mean, make no mistake, they're sending a message to the rest of the roster, right? This is what happens if you don't go out there and fight. At the end of the day, I understand Stephen Thompson. What we want is a fair fight. We want to determine who is the better fighter. And, I get it. Fans that are going to the arena, they bought tickets. That might have been a reason why. Maybe it was a fight that put them over the edge, or who knows. But this isn't boxing, right? In boxing, you lose a big fight, that's it. Your card is scrapped, right? This is mixed martial arts. That's why they stack the cards. You can afford to lose a fight here and there. So, yeah, I mean, I feel bad for the fans, but at the same time, this just kind of happens. That's why we have stacked cards. You win some, you lose some. But for Wonder Boy, like, to not have your opponent go through the same thing you had to go through. I know 3.5 pounds doesn't sound like a lot on paper, but it really is. And it's the fact that one guy had to put himself through hell and the other one didn't. I understand what he's trying to say, but you also have to understand that the UFC has kind of sent messages like this before. They want you to go out and fight. How could you let down the fans? They start with all that type of stuff. So there's going to be repercussions, and that's one of them. Now, Stephen Thompson, he's fought a lot of big fights in his career. He probably has the money where I'm sure this stings, but it's not going to end his life, right? Not every fighter on the roster can do that type of stuff. A lot of fighters on the roster end up having to fight, even though they do feel like they're going into an unfair fight. They don't have the choice that Stephen Thompson has. So I think it's a foul on the UFC. I understand where Stephen Thompson is coming from, and I don't hold it against him. But you know what? Good luck booking your next fight. I think that's going to be very difficult. You're going to go somewhere you don't want to go. You're going to fight someone you don't want to fight. That's just kind of how it happens in the sport.
All right, Danny, your thoughts?
I think ultimately Stephen Thompson made the right decision. Fair and I discussed this at length in the preview show for the card. Look, his goal is to fight for the belt once again. I think the chances of that are not very high, but there are some chances there. He is a big name. He is in the top 10. He is coming off a win. If he's able to maintain healthy, get a couple more victories, and if the division kind of pans out in a way that they're in need of a name contender, he's right there. He's right there. And at 40 years of age, he's got a very small margin of error. I would actually dare to say no margin of error. The moment that he loses from now on, I think he could say goodbye to any title hopes, because at this point, he needs all the cards in his favor for just to have a chance, not even a guarantee. And again, time is of the essence here with Stephen Wonderboy Thompson being 40 years old. So he made the right choice. As far as whether it was fair or foul from the UFC to not pay Thompson his show money, well, I'd like to see him get paid, right? He did everything that he had to do, and they signed a contract that they were going to fight at 170 or 171 pounds. Michel Pereira didn't live up to that. The contract is no longer valid because that's what it was stated. And he has the right to say, no, I don't want to fight. But unfortunately, because of the way the contracts work in the UFC, there's nothing on the contract that says if you make weight, we're going to give you the money. And those are contracts that these fighters and managers willingly sign time and time again. And we don't really see much of a push to change that. So if that's sort of your stance on the matter, don't be surprised if the UFC decides to not give you the show money, because they do not have legality, or they're not forced to pay you your show money just for weighing in. You actually got to get in there and fight. So I guess this is just a bit of a touch on just the contract situation on the grand scheme of things. But technically, no, not a foul. The UFC is in their right to exercise this option if they choose to. That's how the contracts are shaped, and that's what these fighters and managers willingly abide to, fight after fight. And we don't really see much of a push to change that. So yeah, it sucks to not see him not get his money. I wish he should have gotten his money, but that's the way this industry is.
Fada, how about you?
Yeah, listen, I'm not surprised to see that he didn't get paid his show money, because basically what Danny said right there, it's what is expected. Does it suck? Yeah, it sucks. And I don't disagree with his choice to not fight, because at the end of the day, Pereira's ranked number 15, I believe. What happens if you lose to Michel Pereira? Are you no longer a ranked welterweight? When is the last time Wonderboy wasn't a ranked welterweight? And at this point in his career at 40, he still has another title run in him. He said, I don't want to be a gatekeeper. He's had to fight a lot of these rising guys, the Vicente Luques, the Jeff Neals. He's accepted to fight all of these guys. He's not a guy that has turned down fights in the past. I know he recently said he'd rather not fight a grappler and fight more entertaining style fights. He got that in Michel Pereira, but this was kind of a big risk, low reward fight for him in Michel Pereira. So after the weight miss, after everything that happened with him when he fought Darren Till in Liverpool, lost a decision, Darren Till came in heavy. He just doesn't want to relive that again. And at least Darren Till back then was one of the top stars in the UFC. With Michel Pereira, he had a lot to lose if he were to lose that fight. So I don't blame Wonderboy for choosing not to fight. I expect him to be rebooked very soon. And, I believe it's what you said, and he could afford to not fight. I don't think he's in dire need of the money. So yeah, it sucks that the UFC did it. It's not that I agree that they shouldn't get paid, but I'm not surprised to hear that he didn't get paid, as much as it sucks.
Said that, but I'll gladly take the credit.
I think he should have gotten paid. He weighed in. They've set that precedent in the past, I think, way more than not. So I think he should have got paid. 3 pounds is a lot. And I thought he gave a great explanation, and that's why I powered through that and read it for you guys. But all right, let's get to some rapid fire. Let's go real quick on these guys, and then we'll wrap things up for this week. Tony Ferguson's lost 6 in a row, but he still pops with the fans, as we've seen in the past. Sam Malvey, BJ Penn, they've gone through these horrible runs, but the UFC continues to book them. What do you think, Danny? UFC gonna stick with Ferguson? Make it quick, please.
I'd be shocked if they do. I mean, you're talking about a 6-fight losing streak, getting finished in his last 3 fights. Remember, he's also had some issues outside of the cage, with legal issues, DUIs, and that's something that the UFC doesn't necessarily like to be attached to. Obviously, if they had the choice, those are bad headlines. And at this point, I would assume that Ferguson has one of the pricier contracts. I'm not saying it's super high, but certainly is not a $10,000 like a rookie. And at this point, what does he offer at this point, right? Like 6-fight losing streak. So I'd be shocked if he sticks around in the UFC.
All right, we're a little short on time, so let me go straight to the next one. This one will be for Fada. Michael Bisping says Tom Masvidal would run through John Jones like he did Marcin Tybura. What are you giving to Michael Bisping? A fist bump for saying that? A yellow card because he's a little off, or a red card because he's really, really off on that one? This is John Jones we're talking about, Fada.
Yeah, I mean, British bias, I guess. I mean, look, Tom Aspinall is great, but at the end of the day, we're talking about John Jones. There is nothing based off what we've seen from John Jones and how great he is and his legacy and everything he's done for us to ever say that anyone's going to run through him. So I love you, Michael Bisping. I know Tom Aspinall is your boy, and Aspinall is very talented, but to say he's going to run through John Jones is pretty crazy.
All right, well, that sounds like a yellow card, so we'll give him the yellow card for that. Last one's for Goes. Nate Diaz versus Jake Paul. It's finally here, Goes. It's on Saturday. Are you in, man, after all this? Are you going to order this bad boy, or are you and Laura going to go check out Barbie on Saturday night after Font and Sanhagen?
I think I'd rather fight Nate Diaz than watch Barbie, George. So I'm in on this one, but it's not the kind where if nobody shows up, I'm ordering it. I need a couple buddies to pitch in to watch this because, come on, we just had big boxing. We just had MMA. Now you want me to give more money? I'm going to need to do this as a group.
Sounds fair. All right, guys. You guys did an outstanding job, as you always did. As you always do, I should say. Comments and questions were awesome. Cold Coffee was killing it on the 1s and 2s with his B-roll. I, of course, took it to another level. That was fantastic. Guys, we'll see you here every Monday, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. We're the Spinning Back Clique. It's live. It's for you. It's on Facebook. It's on YouTube. Subscribe to YouTube because you'll get a lot of these great videos. You can see past Spinning Back Cliques, a lot of the post-fight coverage from UFC 291, all the stuff leading into Diaz versus Paul. Whatever you want, we're here for you. Hit the like and subscribe one more time. It'll definitely help us out, and we'll see you all next week. Take care and go out and be a champion.